Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a place where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. And so, wherever you're joining us, thank you for joining. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Whether you're on your couch, driving in Montana or Florida or wherever, again, thank you for being here present with us. And so, as always, I want to remind you, please hit that subscribe button below. Please look at the descriptions. We have a lot of different ways you can partner with us. One of them is helping with donations. And so that, of course, pays for a lot of things that we do. Even just being able to air this is so important. And so partner with us. We love it with that tax-deductible donation. It's really helpful. And so let's continue moving into Genesis. And again, before we do, one more question came in. This was a fun one, especially for me because of the background I came from. And so the question was this. And so thank you, Jason, for posting this one. This is a good one. So here we go. Is it against the Bible to drink alcohol? And so for many of us, we came from different tribes that said, no, you don't drink alcohol. That's bad, right? So whether you're a Mormon, an Adventist, wherever you are, this might kind of hit home for you. You might be thinking, yeah, is it bad or not? I've seen so many different discussions on this. There are books written on this. And so is alcohol considered bad in the Bible? Well, first of all, just from the get-go, I want you to think about this. Who wrote this compilation? Yeah, it wasn't present. It wasn't even people hundreds of years ago, right? It wasn't any of those movements. It was Jewish people. So Jewish people, here's the thing about Jewish people. Jewish people drink alcohol. And we also know they've always drank alcohol. This is not a new thing. Jewish people actually drink alcohol. And so when you understand Judaism, you understand also that many of their festivals, the rituals, Passover, all of it, there's alcohol involved. I mean, think about this. When Jesus is, when he does this whole thing that we call communion today, it was actually an element of Passover. When Jesus does this communion with his friends, his followers, he's actually participating in a Seder. And in the Seder, in a Passover, what you have happen is people are actually drinking at least 3 full glasses of wine. And so when Jesus goes into this garden and his disciples are like, oh, I can't stay awake. Not because they're just weak men, not because they didn't get enough sleep the night before. No. They actually have had a lot to drink. Because at Passover and many rituals, whether it's a wedding, whatever, they are drinking alcohol. That's part of their culture. It's part of their rituals. They're drinking actual alcohol. Secondly, Jesus, when he's turning water into wine, I've heard people say, no, Tony, that was grape juice. Well, think about this. He does not. Again, they say you waited to give us the best at the end. Now, if you're at a party, especially a Jewish one, right, where there is a good amount of drinking, you want to bring the very best forward. And the best was not grape juice, like grape juice that isn't fermented, because fermentation back then is actually what gave it the sweetness. If you've ever had grapes, table grapes, you'll notice they're sweet. But that's not the kind of grapes they had then. They had what we know as wine grapes. And I dare any of you, go to a vineyard, grab a couple of those grapes and just pop them in your mouth. See what happens. Because as you taste them, they're going to be very, very bitter. Yeah, that's what happens. But because the fermentation process happened, they didn't have fridges, right? They didn't have a refrigerator to just throw things in. This would ferment. And as it ferments, it gets sweet. It becomes alcoholic. Yeah. So it would make no sense to say, oh, it was grape juice. No. It was definitely wine. It was definitely alcohol. Secondly, think about this. Some of the words I've heard people say, well, there's 2 different words in the Greek and the Hebrew for wine. One's fermented, one's not. No. The places that we see wine used, especially in regard to Jesus, we see oinos first in the Greek, right? Oinos is used, and this is actually wine. Again, this is a reference toward alcoholic wine. It's fermented oinos. In the Hebrew, you have the word yayin. And this word, of course, meant wine. It meant fermented grapes. Yeah, and were certain wines more fermented, less fermented? Of course, we have that today, right? Some of them are more top quality when they're a little bit older. They have a little more sweetness. They have a little more age to them. Yeah, some people even argued Jesus gave them the most alcoholic wine first because that's what you would do. You would give your friends the most alcoholic wine first. After they've had a couple glasses, then you can sneak them the more watered down stuff. Yeah, it makes sense when you think of the culture. Yeah. And so think about this. If you're still not with me, here's some verses, right? Does the Bible say wine is bad? Well, actually, if you look, there's most of the verses where you see wine used. I mean, it's actually talking about the positive elements of wine. And so Genesis 49:12, this is where Jacob's basically telling his sons, here are the blessings. And one of the blessings to one of his sons is this: his eyes shall be red as wine, his teeth white with milk. Again, what an interesting reference to use wine. Yeah, because they were constantly drinking it. Wine was something that was constantly on the table. It was part of life. Come eat my food, drink the wine I have mixed. Yeah, the wisdom writer says this. Again, speaking of wisdom. Yeah, using a wine. If wine was terrible, it would not be associated with wisdom tradition. Yeah, it wouldn't be, wisdom wouldn't be speaking about drinking wine, would it? Yeah, it wouldn't make sense. Let me keep going. Come, all you who are thirsty, come to the waters, and you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without cost. This is Isaiah speaking of inviting others into this kingdom come reality. Yeah, beautiful, right? And it's actually the metaphor of Israel. And then lastly, and again, this is just 4 verses out of just tons of them all throughout the Bible. This is in Joel. And this is actually referring to God says wine is a gift, right? Wine is a gift from God. Yeah. So watch this. The Lord replied, I am sending you a grain, new wine, and olive oil, enough to satisfy you fully. Never again will you make an object of scorn to the nations. Again, new wine does not mean somehow it's grape juice. No. New wine meant it's fuller, it's richer, right? And again, wine had a deep metaphor with Israel. If it was such a terrible thing, they wouldn't use it for such metaphors as restoration and healing, would they? Now, there are places you'll find where wine is considered a negative thing. If you look there, Isaiah 5:11, what does it say? Woe to those who rise early in the morning, that they may pursue strong drink. So again, woe to you who are constantly looking for strong drink. The first thing you do in the morning, right? That's Isaiah 5. Another one. Wine is a mocker. I grew up with this one constantly being shared with me. Don't drink wine, Tony. It's bad. It's evil. Wine's a mocker. Strong drink is a brawler. And whoever is intoxicated by it is not wise. Again, that's Proverbs 20, a wisdom. Be not addicted to wine, or pugnacious, but gentle, peaceable, free from the love of money. That's in Timothy. We're looking at a verse from the New Testament even. Deuteronomy 32:33. Their wine is the venom of serpents, the deadly poison of cobras. Whose wine? Yeah, that's the question you should be asking. But of course, what do all these have in common? They're not saying that wine is bad. What they're saying is drunkenness, right? The idea of not being a wise individual was someone who is drunk, who is constantly unaware. The drunkard, the wino, that's the person we don't follow. That's the opposite of wisdom voices. So to answer your question, the Bible actually is the very opposite. It not condemn wine. It doesn't condemn alcohol. But of course it does give warning. And so anyone who is struggling with like an addictive personality, if you have a history of alcohol, should you be drinking alcohol? Probably not, or at least you should deeply consider why you want to drink in the first place. However, having wine over a meal, those kind of things, this is not a bad thing. In fact, if you want to follow the Bible, if you want to be a follower of the Jewish tradition, then wine would be a pretty normal thing. Pretty good, right? All right, awesome. Let me step into now Genesis with you. Understanding the Jewish narrative, again, means that we have to understand their captivity. So again, 587 BC, Israel falls captive to Babylon. Again, the Babylonians, they are taking everything. They've taken everything, and the concern for Israel is, how will we assimilate? Are we going to take on all of the traits of Babylon and all the other nations that have come together here in this melting pot? Or will we hold on to what we know to be good? The Jewish narrative, what happens to all our traditions, our rituals, our stories? What happens to the next generations? Will they forget their roots? That's what's happening. And so again, the Torah is basically written in a response to the worry, the concern, the fear of assimilation. It is not a historically accurate document. That is not the purpose of the book of Genesis or Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, any of the Torah. That's not the point. The Torah is a compilation of stories, poetry, songs, mythologies told around campfires, prophetic musings, warnings. It's all of those things. And it's so beautiful. It's there to offer wisdom, learning from the past, looking to the future. It's essentially it's a monument. Right? It's a story, it's a picture. It encapsulates the very values of what it means to be Hebrew. And so again, one more time, Torah is a complete narrative of Israel, miniaturized through its tellings. Everywhere we read, we're going to see Israel. We're going to find it over and over again. And so Genesis 1, that's where we are. We're in Genesis 1. We've looked at how Enuma Elish, the Babylonian story, is that their God steps in and their gods are they're chaos. They're violent. And in order to get life, you have to do all these violent, terrible things in order to create violent, terrible people. That's their story, right? But that's not the Jewish Hebrew story. It's not at all. Their God's different. He doesn't hover over the waters, create chaos. Their God steps into the chaos, creates order, steps onto the image of the table, our dining room tables, seen the mess, and their God steps in and begins to busboy away the chaos, right? Removes things, separates things. And once things are separated, our God, like we talked about last week, steps in and begins placing things now in a beautiful order, bringing life from the chaos. That's the beauty. And so today we'll look at Genesis 1:20 through 23. And so again, not a lot of verses, but there is some beauty here I want to share with you. So God said, "Let the waters swarming of living creatures, and let fowl fly over the earth across the expanse of the heavens. And God created the great sea monsters and everything living creature that crawls, from which the waters swarmed, according to their kind, and every winged fowl according to its kind. And God saw that it was good." It was tov, right? And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply," right? That's why many people have a lot of kids. Be fruitful and multiply. "Fill the waters of the seas. Let the fowl multiply upon the earth." And it was evening, and it was morning, and this was the fifth day. So again, remember this. Remember this picture here we see. This is how they viewed the world. They saw waters above, waters below. They saw everything else in between where life happens. Life happens in the in-between, right? Life happens. Life happens in the change, the chaos, the movement, the growth. That's where things take place. And so God begins to put things into order, place things in between the waters, right? So look at this. There's a word that pops up here a lot. Right? Just in 3 verses, you've got 3 different ways that this is said. The waters are swarming. The waters are swarming. Even the creatures are swarming. There's a lot of swarming. It's a word we don't usually use unless we're talking about the murder hornets, right? Swarming. What does the word swarming mean? In the Hebrew, swarming is an interesting word. The word swarm doesn't mean like a bunch of bees swarming around and attacking someone. That's not what the word swarm meant in the Hebrew. We've done our best with the limited language we have. But for the Hebrews, this word, it actually means to set things in motion. Yeah, what a cool picture of the divine. The divine is like this hand that steps down and winds up the robot, the little robot toy, right? Winds him up and lets him go. The image here is this image of this God stepping in, winding something up, and letting it go in motion. Have you ever done that before? I know raising kids, people talk to me all the time. It's so weird for them, right? Many of us, when we let our kid go to school for the first day, you're setting that child in motion. And you hope that you've done everything you can to prepare them for that first day. Think about all the firsts you have as a parent. The first time they go to college, the first time they have their first kiss, whatever the firsts are. Again, it's fascinating because they're set in motion. We're setting things in motion, and the divine picture of God is that he turns the key, sets Man and all life in motion. Things swarm, right? I want you to think about this. Isaac Newton, he created some interesting laws about motion that are still very applicable today. Here are the three. Every object persists in its state of rest or uniform motion in a straight line unless it's compelled to change that state by forces impressed on it. So number one, again, we get this idea, the object continues moving in the same direction unless, of course, it's moved, right? We get that part. Number two, force is equal to the change in momentum per change in time. For a constant mass, force equals mass times acceleration. So again, I know some of you are like, no, I already did physics in college. I don't want to hear it anymore. Give me a little bit more, right? Just a little more time. Let me explain why this is so beautiful. Number three, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. When you get down to the very basic of what he's done here in these three laws, essentially this, an object at rest is going to stay at rest, right? Forever, as long as nothing pushes or pulls it. However, an object in motion, once you set that object in motion, once it starts beginning to move, and again, imagine we're in a vacuum, right? There's no gravity to pull on it. Once you push this thing in motion, it's going to travel in this straight line forever, right? As long as it takes until something pulls or changes or moves it. That's the idea of motion here. And it's beautiful how so many times science and theology and physics, all of it together, it begins to open up the world around us. These verses come alive. Basically, remember this, Israel is reminded here with this idea of swarming. They're reminded that what gives life motion and movement is the divine. And yes, we live in a world where there are things that constantly bombard us and push us off track. But if we can remind ourselves there's something that brought us in motion, there's something that pushed us to this point, we can essentially find our way back, can't we? Without the waters swarming, life has no motion. We need that wind up. We need the swarming waters. We need that initial first push. It's beautiful. And the divine does this for these people. And so I want you to think about this for yourself, just for a moment. What gives you life? What energizes you? Think about that for a moment. I think for many of us, we don't spend any time doing those things, do we? What helps you get moving, get motivated? Once you answer that question, I want you to think about this. How much time are you spending with that thing? For some of my friends, it's just the pursuit of answering questions, delving in, asking questions, and then trying to find answers and solutions. That brings them to life. And whenever they're not doing that thing, they're just bored out of their minds. They're just slovenly living. For me, that's the case. Other people I know, it's spending time with family, engaging in new relationships, all of those kind of things. What is it that brings you life? What is it that winds you up, right? For the Babylonians, it was violence. It was rage. It was those kind of things. For the Hebrews, what they were finding is the thing that was bringing them life, the thing that was bringing them alignment with God was not violence and oppression. That wasn't it. Their narrative suggests this. The thing that brings us life, the thing that brings us motivation, energy, love is the divine. Every time there's something positive happening in the world, anytime there's shifts and movements that are bringing us closer to good, right? Whenever there's forgiveness, whenever there's moments where the widow or the orphan, the stranger within our gates is helped, that's when we see the divine. And so those moments where things are set in motion, those are the things we hold on to. Those are the things we learn to find in our own lives. So Israel's learning over and over again. God sets us in motion. God sets us in motion. And the question is, will you stay on that path? Even when certain things are bombarding you, will you choose to stay set course? Will you continue to stay set, having that goal in mind of finding peace, love, shalom? Will you find a way to get back on course, even when you're pushed off? It's a beautiful, beautiful picture here. The swarming, the movement, right? That's the beauty here. Israel, will you get back on path? God set you in motion. You're moving. You never stop moving. You're still moving, right? Maybe you had a couple setbacks, a couple problems. You're still moving. You're still alive. Will you get back on track? Will you take the steps necessary to get back on track, continue to move toward life? That's the question. That's the idea here of Israel miniaturized. And it's really beautiful. How fun is it that one word, swarming, can bring us into this kind of conversation? It's beautiful. And so how do we take it home? How do we continue living this thing? I want to give you a couple challenges that I think are really helpful for me, and maybe you'll find it helpful for you. Number one, where do you get guidance when you're needing direction? I think that's such a valuable question. When you need guidance in your life, who are the people you go to? Who are the people you go to? And here's the harder question. When's the last time you talked to them? Yeah. When's the last time you talked to that mentor, that individual with the wisdom in your life? Because if you're way off track right now, something tells me you haven't spent much time with them lately. Yeah. Or those passages or that book or the pieces of advice you've gleaned from literature, whatever it is, wherever you find the wind up, have you spent much time with it lately? Yeah. Number two, take time to consider who your trusted mentors and friends and sources are. Sometimes they change. And so you might want to ask yourself right now, are those trusted friends, those mentors, are they steering me in the right direction anymore or not? Because sometimes you outgrow certain mentors. Sometimes you outgrow certain friends. Are they holding you back? Are they gravity pulling you back? Or are those people continuing to help move you forward? Think about that one. And then lastly, I want you to read Proverbs 4:6. I think it's such a beautiful wisdom piece to consider. How his wisdom protected you in the past. That's the idea here in Proverbs. Wisdom protects you. It guides you. How has it protected you in the past? And what wisdom are you most thankful for today? Include that in your meditation, your prayers. What wisdom are you so thankful for that showed up and helped continue guiding you along that path? It wound you up. It moved you forward. What was that wisdom? And maybe today we can be thankful for it. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. And as always, please consider donating. www.ethos-church.org/donate. And again, we do tax deductions here. We'd love to be a partner with you in sharing these messages. Share them with friends, family, even your enemies. Share them. We think they bring life. And again, if you want to be part of live conversations twice a month, please email me at tonywerfel@gmail.com, and we'd love to have you join us for our Ethos Living Room sessions. They are so good. There's so much life. We agree, we disagree, we bring our perspectives. It's so good. And then lastly, please consider subscribing. Hit that subscribe button. Join us here on YouTube. Become part of this little family called Ethos. We're so happy you joined us. Thank you again for being a part of this. Love ya. We'll see you next week.